Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you to everybody who's here in person as well as online. My name is Dan, and thank you for joining me for Understanding Your Job Offer, presented by State Farm and Nextdoor. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me and Nextdoor very briefly before we jump into the material, because I know that's why you're here, for the exciting job offer discussion. So a little bit about me. I am a financial coach at an entity called Nextdoor. We are a part of State Farm. We're actually a physical location in Chicago where we offer three things. So we are a community space, kind of like a WeWork space, if anybody's familiar, where people come in, work on entrepreneurship, kind of get their projects done. We also offer community events, but then we also offer free financial education. So that's my role as a financial coach, is to meet with people individually, one-on-one, help them achieve their financial goals. That's something that State Farm offers to the community as a way to give back in Chicago, but then also in all of our major hub locations, so as Phoenix, Dallas, and Atlanta. So that's where I am, that's what I do. We offer this as kind of a no sales benefit. We're not trying to sell, we're just trying to help our communities. So if that's something you're interested in, if finances is something you'd like to learn more about, we encourage you to subscribe. You can see the link here, and I'll mention it again at the end of the presentation, where we can provide additional follow-up kind of financial resources, whether that's budgeting, credit, retirement, job offers, whatever that looks like. So that's a little bit about me. Before we get into the presentation, this is meant to be kind of an engaging, hopefully a little bit more of a conversation. So obviously I have the materials that I will present, but as you have conversations or questions, concerns as we go through, please stop me, throw something at me, do whatever you need to do to get my attention so that we can have a little bit more of a discussion. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today, our conversation is all about understanding your job offer, because when you get a job offer, as you're going to find, there's a lot of different pieces that go just beyond, let's say, salary when you're making your decision. So just so I know, and I know career fair hasn't even started, I'm not trying to set the bar too high, but does anybody have maybe a job offer in hand, or just hoping to by the end? Anybody? All right, yeah, we got a couple of hands. All right, I like that. I don't know what this half hand is, but I like it. Well, congratulations. Hopefully that's a problem we're all dealing with by the end of these next 3 days. So a little bit of what we're going to cover today. We're going to go through kind of these five main topics. We're going to talk a little bit about how compensation and salary are different. So what are you looking at when you're looking at a job offer beyond just what they're going to pay you necessarily? Then we're going to kind of go through an overview of health insurance. For a lot of people, this is their first time evaluating or picking health insurance. Can be a little bit daunting for people in their first job or even in their fifth or sixth job. So we want to talk a little bit about that. We're going to go over life and disability insurance. As I'm sure all of you know, this is National Life Insurance Awareness Month, so I'm sure that's why you're all here, and I want to make sure I give you what you're here for. I see a few smiles at my jokes. I'll take that. We're going to talk a little bit about the value of paid time off and what that looks like. We're going to talk about your work retirement plan, and you is the title of the book that I'll never write. And then we'll kind of close out with, again, questions and concerns. So, any questions before we dive right in? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to keep us moving. So the first thing that we want to talk about is salary versus compensation. So for most people, when they're thinking about their job, getting a job, whether that's kind of a salaried job, which we'll talk about, or an hourly job, the first thing you think about, the first thing that you're kind of worried about or want to know more about is the salary, which is that how much you're getting paid. So this sounds like $20,000 a year, $30,000 a year, $40,000 a year, those sort of numbers. Quick tip, if any of you are looking at something that's going to pay you hourly, which can still be a great job, obviously, a tip here is multiply whatever your hourly rate is by about 2,000, and that's about your equivalent salary. So if you're making 20 an hour, you're going to be making about 40 a year, 40,000 a year, if that makes sense, how that math works out. Don't think too much about the fact that that means you work 2,000 hours a year. Just kind of leave that out of your brain. Compensation includes all of the things that a company is paying for you. So this number is typically higher. This number is going to include benefits like health insurance and some of those others we talked about on the agenda, life, disability, paid time off, some retirement contributions perhaps. So these numbers can look very different. And as you can see here, because the Department of Labor recently found that benefits actually account on average for more than 30% of your total compensation. So everything you receive as a benefit is actually more than 30% of what you get paid or what you're worth. So to keep this a little bit more engaging, yes, I understand it's about a job offer, but still a little bit more engaging, we're going to keep going back to these two sample jobs that I have creatively named Job 1 and Job 2. And you can see here, we just assigned them random salaries of $40,000 for Job 1 and $35,000 for Job 2. And then as we go through each of those benefits we talked about, we're going to assign each of those a value, give you the tools to do that when you get your own job offer, so we can compare these two with total compensation by the time we get to the end of this 40 minutes or so. Any questions or concerns on that? I know that's not groundbreaking yet, but we're getting there. Okay, so let's talk about health insurance. Has anybody ever looked at a health insurance offer? Okay, I got one in the back, but I'm guessing this is new for a lot of us. Health insurance is daunting, and trust me, it is okay to be daunting whether you're 20 or 30 or 50. I answer these questions for all sorts of different people. And so I want to cover some of the basics for you so you know what you're comparing when you're looking at a couple of different job offers, or even if one employer offers you a couple of different health insurance options, which is not uncommon. So, some health insurance basics. Premium. This is the cost of your insurance. It's what you're going to be paying every month. So your premium might be $70 a month, $100 a month, $150 a month. Pretty simple there, it's what you pay. Generally, the benefit that companies are offering is they are paying part of that premium for you. You may not see it, but your health insurance may be offered for $70 a month, and it may cost much more if you were to go buy it without the company's backing. We'll talk about that. Deductible. This is the amount you pay before the insurer pays anything. So if you ever broke your leg as a kid, and your parents rolled their eyes and said, oh, now we have to meet our deductible, this is what they're talking about. And we'll go through an example. But it basically just means you pay this before your insurance kicks in. Your copayment, this is an amount you may pay every time you go to visit the doctor. Generally pretty nominal, $10 to $30, but you have to say, hey, kind of putting some money down to see the doctor. Coinsurance. This is the big one when you're looking at health insurances. We'll show you an example, but most health insurances come with some fancy number that's something slash something. 80/20, 70/30, 60/40. This is your co-insurance. You are responsible for paying that smaller number as a percent of any medical issues you have. And again, I'm going to walk through an example. Last is maximum out-of-pocket. This is the maximum amount you'll pay in a year no matter what happens to you, no matter how bad things go or how maybe good things go if you need some, I don't know, you're getting plastic surgery to look less like me. This is the max you will ever pay out of pocket. So this is a good number to keep in mind as well as you're starting that first job, as you think about maybe saving some of your money for an emergency fund. Maybe you're out on your own for the first time. You'll want to know that number to know what your kind of worst case scenario could be. So I know that's a little complicated. One thing I will pitch here, on our website, nextdoorchicago.com, we have a section for tools, and it has this handout, but prettied up a little bit, actually. So if you want, and you're saying, hey, I'm looking at a health insurance, I don't remember exactly what all those terms meant, that's somewhere you can go get this, kind of lay it next to it and say, okay, that's what this number is, that's what this number is, that's what this number is. So hopefully that's a resource for you if you need it in the future. So let's look at the example of James. Meet James. Everybody say hi, James. Oh, wow, you actually said it. Thank you. That's so kind. So this is James' insurance up top, right? We talked about copayment of $30, what he has to pay to see the doctor. $1,000 deductible, what he has to pay before insurance kicks in. 80/20, so he's going to be responsible for 20% of his health insurance costs, and the max he'll ever pay is $5,000. So James is a responsible young man, and he's going to get himself a regular checkup. So he makes this appointment with his doctor. He arrives, shows them that he has insurance. He has to make that $30 copayment to visit the doctor, like we talked about. You can see here our note, sometimes he might not even need to do that. A lot of times preventative medicine is free. It's 100% covered. So, okay, James had a pretty good doctor visit. Unfortunately for James, James sprains his ankle. You can see here he's jogging. I don't know, I'm actually from Chicago. I don't know how any of you here jog in 105, but let's say he's crazy and he's doing it. He's jogging and he hurts his ankle. So he decides, hey, I'm going to go get treatment from a specialist that I know that works on ankles. He gets treatment and he finds out that his bill is actually going to be $5,000. So he's like, okay, I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to pay for that, how insurance is going to pay for that. Remember, he has a $1,000 deductible, so he's going to have to pay that first. And then 80% of his bill will be covered by insurance. The rest of the bill will be covered 80% by insurance, and 20% he will have to cover. So before you do all the math in your head, I know you're all capable, you're good ASU students, but I wouldn't be. Here's what we're talking about. He pays that $1,000 deductible. Then he has to pay 20% of that $4,000, so another $800. So he's going to have to pay $1,800. The insurance is going to take care of the other $3,200. Now, James is a very unlucky guy, unfortunately. Just straight bad luck, right? His ankle heals. He decides, I'm ready to go dominate maybe some Thanksgiving co-ed flag football. And unfortunately, he breaks his ankle this time. And it winds up he needs surgery. So he kind of knows what he's doing. He's thinking about it. He gets his insurance. I like it says he understands his insurance options, like he was going to wait till next year. Like, oh, I'll just be on a broken ankle for a year. Like, obviously, he goes and gets this fixed. So this surgery costs $30,000. Yikes, obviously, big scary number. But remember, he's already paid $1,800 for his original treatment. So, for those of you ahead of the game, the math here, he doesn't have to pay that deductible. He's already paid it this year. So all he's responsible for is that 20% of the bill, which is $6,000. But remember, his max out of pocket is $5,000. And he's already paid $1,800 of that. So he winds up paying $3,200. Again, not an ASU student, not quite up to your guys' level. And the insurance is going to wind up paying the full $26,800 the rest of that surgery would have cost. And let's say he's very unlucky and he breaks his other ankle the next day. Anybody have a guess how much the insurance is going to pay? 100%. From here on out, for the rest of the year, James is off the hook for any sort of insurance bill, health insurance bill. So as you can see, health insurance is an incredibly valuable benefit, because you're not paying $26,800 if you're James. Hopefully you guys are made of stronger ankle stuff, but you never know, right? So we are going to get back to what does that mean for the value of my health insurance, the value of my job offer. There's a couple of ways you can look at this. This is one of them, but we'll talk about it in a minute. The best way to look at your value of your health insurance is look at your company and what they're offering for health insurance or your job offer. Then compare a very similar health insurance policy through what's called the open marketplace, which you've probably heard of. It's been in the news a lot. So that is available through healthcare.gov. So the reason we went through all of those kind of numbers is we need you to be able to compare apples to apples. If you find a policy with a $4,000 deductible and 60-40 co-insurance and you compare it to James's insurance, yeah, it's going to cost less, but because it's going to cover a lot less. So we want you to be able to kind of compare apples to apples. So then you see, okay, my benefits package told me that it's going to cost me X through my employer, and then you can figure out your benefit. Most of the time, premiums, what you're paying, are talked about in monthly numbers. So you just say, here's what my monthly number would cost me if I were to buy it on my own. Here's what it cost me through my employer. We'll times that by 12 to figure out a yearly number. So in the case of Job 1 and Job 2, you can see here we went on healthcare.gov and said, okay, let's say James's insurance would cost him $500, and Job 1 offers that same type of insurance for $250 a month, versus Job 2 offers it for $150 a month. You can see here then how much he is saving per month, and then how much that means per year. So we simply add that to the compensation table here to say, hey, while yes, Job 2 is paying him a little bit less, he is paying less for his health insurance. That's an added benefit to him. Now, I will admit this is kind of a wacky way to get to a value, and I realize probably most of you are not going to go to healthcare.gov and price out the option on the side and figure out what you're saving. But I want you to know these numbers so that you can compare your insurance. Hey, This one may cost less, but provide me less. This one may cost less, but provide me more. I want you to be able to look at a couple of different offers, either through the same employer or through different employers, and then be able to add it here where you say, hey, I might be making $40,000 in job one, but I'm paying $250 a month out of pocket versus I'm only paying $150 in job two. So that's another way you could look at it. The other way is you could subtract these numbers to say, hey, what does that leave me in my pocket, even though one's paying me more than the other? So I realize, again, not necessarily expecting you to go, I'll do that, but a way to think about it. I've talked for a while. I'm going to pause there. Questions, thoughts, concerns, anything about health insurance before we move on? Hit me. Great question. So the question was, for those online, if your company offers health insurance, can you stay on your parents until you're 26? 100%. You just need, in theory, to be covered. So you can do that through your parents or through your own. Be careful. Don't show your parents your offer, because I remember when I got my first job, I showed my parents and they went, your coverage is better than ours. We're booting you off. And then I was like, great, I'm excited to pay for it. So, but yes, absolutely. As long as you're covered, you can choose either option. Yeah, question here.
If we are a healthy 20-something,
Yeah.
realistically, how much value should we place on health insurance versus other benefits?
Great question, and that's something we're going to kind of talk through at the very end. My next steps, I talk about making sure you think about what values are best for you or what benefits are best for you. If you're healthy, you're young, you may not have to care a lot about your health insurance because you may not be using it a ton. You still want to look at some things like your copay and some other things you might use for preventative medicine. But here's what I would say. Younger, healthier people are generally able to take a little bit more risk in their health insurance. And by that I mean they can take a higher deductible, a higher co-insurance because they're less likely to need it. However, you could still, God forbid, get hit by a bike while you're walking to work. Or, something could happen. You could slam your finger in a car door. All those silly little things. So it is still worth understanding because it may still matter to you. But yes, in general, you can take a little bit more risk when you're thinking about if you're young and you're like, hey, I don't think I'm going to need a ton of medication. And the opposite, if you're somebody who knows you have something like maybe diabetes or Crohn's or some sort of more chronic issue, you may be willing and interested in paying a little bit more to know that your ongoing costs will be less. So what I would always suggest there, run the numbers. Look at your health insurance. Look at it if you have no medical expenses in a year, $1,000, $5,000, maybe $10,000. Just throw those all through. As you can see here, it took us 2 minutes. And just know what the risk you're taking is. But it may not be as important to you as other benefits, for sure. Good questions. Any others? Okay, let's move on. It's Life Insurance Month, everybody. Let's get into it. All right, buckle up. So, a common benefit offered by your employer are both group life and group disability insurance. So I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about these, but they are important. Group life insurance. So what is life insurance? Just like health insurance, it has a premium that you're paying every month to have insurance, and then it pays a death benefit, aka an amount of money, if you die. Again, as a younger person, this risk is probably a little bit lower, and frankly, you may not need as much because your expenses, if you were to die, are pretty minimal. Potentially, funeral costs and wrapping things up, but you don't need to support a kid, put them through college, pay down a mortgage for a spouse. But it's still worth having some amount for those expenses, and certainly if you want to leave a legacy, or maybe you have your parents co-signed on some student loans, something like that, it could be worth doing. So why do it through work? What's the benefit here? Just like health insurance, the big thing here is it's much, 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 much cheaper. So your company is going to subsidize it greatly. The other thing that's pretty important here, especially if you are someone who is a little bit worried about your health situation, is there's no medical exam required. They're insuring the whole company's employees, so they kind of assume some people will be healthy, some people won't be. Unlike if you go get it individually, they're going to look at your individual health. So if you know you have some risk factors, maybe in your family or an ongoing disease, this could be a really affordable way to get this coverage. Generally, you're offered some amount, maybe 1 times your salary, and you can choose to buy up additional amounts. So maybe you can buy up to 2 times your salary. But like I said, it is much cheaper generally than getting out in the market. The big negative, this question here, if you leave your employer, it traditionally goes away. So if you do think you have some big need for the rest of your life, you may want to explore it outside of your employer. But it's a great benefit for people just starting out who only need maybe a modest amount of coverage, which is probably where most of you are, probably. Any questions on that part? Okay, so like I said, I'm here to provide education, not to advise, but I can frankly say, for most of you at this age, what's far more important is disability insurance. What is disability insurance? How does it work? It's pretty much what it sounds like. If you become unable to work, then your disability insurance kicks in and pays you some amount of your salary. It's generally a percentage. 40, 50, 60, something like that percentage of your salary. Again, it is much, much, much cheaper traditionally through your employer than to get it on your own. The negative, if you leave your employer, it generally does go away. So it's only good while you're at an employer. So if you are planning on doing, let's say, a year-long gap, you're going to take a gap year, something that's maybe something you want to look into because your ability to work right now is the most valuable thing that all of you in this room have, because you have many, many years of the ability to work and earn money. You are much, 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 much more likely to get disabled than you are to die. That could be, obviously, we all think of, losing a limb. It could be something like that, but it could be something like chronic migraines or a concussion or all sorts of these other kind of quote-unquote invisible disabilities, right? Back issues, things like that. It is, I think the last stat I saw, something like 1 out of 7 people gets disabled in their working career, if not even a little higher. So it is super worth considering this one through your employer. Any questions on that? Yeah, in the back.
Are these both mandatory usually when you get a job?
No. Generally, you have the option of choosing which benefits you want to take and which ones you don't want to take. The more you take, obviously, the more they might be withdrawing from your paycheck. Now, I will say, occasionally, on these two specifically, some amount is offered for free. So like I said, you may get something like 1 times your salary of life insurance for free. You may not. It may be some nominal cost, but it may be free. So certainly if something's free, I would suggest taking it. But no, you get to kind of pick and choose in a process called open enrollment, which is generally in the fall or when you first start. So you will have an option if you start your job in May, don't worry about that, to pick and choose, hey, I don't want health insurance because I'm on my parents, but I do want life and disability, for example.
And you said it's when you leave the employee, you lose whatever you invested. But even so, there's no way to switch between 2 companies. There's never an option, even if it's the same provider.
Gotcha. Yeah, the question was about leaving the company and losing the benefits. So certainly if you go to a new company, you can start taking their benefits. When you leave, you have the option of switching. And so if they provide you life insurance, if they provide you disability insurance, you can take them up on that and have that offered. You won't take the old one with you. Generally, even if it's through the same insurance company, you do not take that with you. You restart under the new program. There are some things you can generally convert your life insurance and then take it with you, but then the cost goes up. So it can get a little granular in there, but generally, no, you don't take it with you. You restart it through the new company, which may offer more, may offer less, which is, again, is kind of the point of this. If you have 2 different insurance or 2 different job offers, look and see, hey, one offers a flat 10 grand life insurance and one offers my salary. Well, certainly it's going to be probably more if it's your salary, depending on what you're getting paid. Good questions. Any others? Okay. So again, what is the value of this? How much do we determine it's worth? Again, the simple way to do it would just be to go determine what it would cost you without the employer helping you. So get in touch with an insurance agent. State Farm has those, might have heard of them. Or you can go through, there's some offerings on the internet, other companies, and figure out what this would cost you. Then compare that to what it's costing you through your employer. Then you kind of, again, same formula as last time. If it would have cost me $100, which is what you're going to kind of see here as our example, if these would cost me $100 and one job is offering them for $75, one job is offering them for 25, then I can figure out, 25 and 15, I was looking at the wrong column, then you can figure out one is saving me $75 a month, one's saving me $85 a month, and I can kind of compute a value on that for the year by multiplying by 12. Again, that is one way to do it. I realize not everyone's going to go price these out on their own, but it's a good way to get an idea of the value. And if you don't want to do it that way, it's at least something you want to look into to say, hey, if I have 2 job offers, knowing you're all from ASU, maybe 3 or 4, what are the different offers? What are the costs through these different offers? What does that mean for what I'm able to get? And which one is more attractive to me if I'm particularly worried about, life insurance. If I am bungee jumping every weekend, then maybe that matters a little more to you than it would to somebody else. So you can see here we've kind of added in, again, job 2, slightly better compensation here for what they're offering. They're a little bit cheaper here. Any questions on that before we move on?
One question.
Please.
The disability insurance, you have both short-term and long-term.
Correct.
Do you have to take both of them, or is there somebody, is like you were talking about for younger people, would you suggest one of them?
Right. So the question was about the difference between short-term and long-term disability. So typically, just like it sounds, short-term disability would cover you if there's a short-term injury. Long-term disability covers you if there's a long-term disability. Generally, you're covered at a higher amount of your salary for short-term, maybe 100%, 80%, something like that. Long-term, you're covered at less. Typically, it depends on the employer if you have the option to take one versus the other. Oftentimes, but not always, sometimes short-term disability is actually free and you have to pay for long-term. So you'll have to just look at your benefits package to let you see what they do and don't choose. A common thing you see, though, is you're often allowed to buy a supplemental amount of long-term. So they may offer short-term, long-term at 50% of your salary and long-term at 65% of your salary. And then it's up to you to determine, hey, do I really truly think I need that or not? And how much is it costing me? I will tell you, typically, depends on the employer, it is very, very, very cheap. So knowing that the risk is much higher than that of death, I think it's generally advisable, but it, again, is going to depend on your situation, the price, et cetera, et cetera. But I would say life is one that, as a younger person, may or may not be as important to you. Disability is kind of more important to you now than it ever will be. Because if you get disabled at 60, you might not have planned on retiring at 60, but you maybe could. If you get disabled at 25, you don't have a lot of recourse. You haven't saved a lot throughout your whole career. Does that make sense? Great. Any other questions on that stuff? Okay. There's no other questions. I'm going to keep us moving then. Let's talk about paid time off, or PTO. Yes, it's a fancy acronym, paid time off, PTO. So this is a benefit that is exactly what it sounds like. You can get paid despite the fact that you're not working. Most companies offer somewhere between 50 to 52 weeks. No? Nobody believes me on that one? All right, well, I tried. So this is a benefit that you can get paid when you are sick, when you are on vacation, maybe you're taking care of family. Any reason that you need to be out of the office, you can typically get paid for some amount of time. Not every job offers this, of course, but it is fairly common. It's pretty simple to do the math on this one, so no, we're not going to dwell on it, right? You know what you get paid. So let's say in this example, you're getting paid $40,000, and you can figure out what that is per week if you're going to work 52 weeks a year. So in this case, right around $770. I want to add zeros for some reason today. $770 if you divide $40,000 by your 52 weeks of the year. So then to figure out how the value of you being able to say, hey, I'm still getting my $40,000 even though I'm not working for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you simply multiply that value of your week by however many weeks of PTO you're being offered. So you can see if you're being offered 3 weeks, it winds up being $2,300 roughly dollars of value. For 4 weeks, it's a little over $3,000. So again, this can add up pretty quickly to be a pretty valuable benefit. And getting back to what we kind of were talking about earlier, can be a really important benefit for people. You may be willing to accept a little bit less salary to be able to take off 3 or 4 weeks a year over something that's offering maybe a week or 2. So that may be important to you if you're a traveler, or you know you like to spend a lot of time with your family, or some other things that are important to you. So in our hypothetical example, we just did that exact same math, but it gets a little bit different when you are comparing two different salaries, right? You can see here that $40,000 a year job, like we mentioned, is about $770 a week for PTO. The $35,000 naturally is a little bit lower, about $675, because you're getting paid a little less. However, it winds up still being a little bit more valuable in job 3 or job 2 here, because they're offering you 4 weeks while the other job's offering you 3. So pretty simple to do the math there, times one by the other, add them together. But you can start to see here, we're closing that gap where, yes, you're getting paid a little bit less in job 2, but suddenly you're starting to think about, well, maybe my health insurance costs me a little bit less. Maybe I can get a little bit more time off. Maybe I can do, so you can start to look at, is this going to fully close the gap for me? I don't know. It depends on you and whether you value the dollars or the time off, but it's starting to be a question you need to start thinking about. So before we get to retirement, because that one's a little bit lengthier, there's a lot of moving pieces there. Any questions on the PTO one? I know it's not rocket science, but I think it's worth mentioning. Didn't figure there would be ASU students. I figure you'll be, working 52 weeks a year to make CEO a couple of years from now. So, okay, let's talk about the value of retirement. So, the other way your employer can help you benefits-wise is by helping you save for retirement, and they can do that in a number of ways. One of them is traditionally, and we'll talk about the methods, employers often offer you an easy and automatic way to save for retirement. So you decide how much of your paycheck you want to go toward retirement savings, and it just disappears. You don't have to do any math. It's gone. It's there. It's in an account that can help you save. The other way is they can offer to match some of your retirement savings. So oftentimes if you put some money away for retirement, they will give you some additional money towards your retirement. As you can see, yes, this is potentially free money, and you can tell I'm excited about it as a finance nerd because I capitalized 2 words in the same sentence. So English majors would yell at me, but here we are. So this is potentially free money that you can use toward retirement. Make sense so far? Okay. Let's talk about some of the terminology because this stuff can get confusing. So this is, again, available on our website, nextdoorchicago.com, through that tools section. So if you get offered a retirement plan and you're like, oh, I don't remember what all those different terms meant, this is something you can go access and you can go see. So there are a couple of types of retirement accounts. There's what I call the 4 suite. So you can see here in the 401k on the top left, which is probably what most of you will have access to, is what corporations offer you to help you save. Nonprofits or public organizations will offer you a 403b, and local government agencies will offer you a 457. Now I know you're asking yourselves, how do they get these engaging names? They literally come from the line of the tax code that they're in. It's that boring. Sorry, that's the way it is. These all operate very, very similarly. You will have some money come out of your paycheck automatically and into one of these accounts. Just depends on what sort of company that you're working for. You may also have heard of or hear of what's called an IRA. This is an individual retirement account, IRA. This is a personal retirement account that you can contribute to every year that you have earned income. So this is separate from what you're doing at work. So if some uncle or aunt told you, hey, you should really start an IRA right when you get started, you certainly can, but that will be different from what your work is doing for you traditionally. So work is going to probably be a 4 normally. IRA is something you can do on the side, and you can use both, neither, one or the other. It's kind of up to you which way you want to build those pieces. So I know this stuff is pretty high level to get started, but I wanted to kind of give you some overview. If you see, hey, we offer a 403b, and you go, what? The other thing a company might offer you, there's 2 ways that these kind of accounts can benefit you. So the general idea behind retirement savings is you put money away and you get a tax advantage. That's why the government gives you what I call the carrot and the stick. The carrot is, hey, save for retirement, pay less taxes, yay. And then just as a warning, there is generally a stick where if you try to take money out of a retirement account before you turn 59 and a half years old, they will penalize you. They will take an additional percentage of that money away from you because they're trying to say, yay, you put money away for retirement, and now leave it alone. So just know that when you are thinking about using these and how much you want to contribute, you want to make sure that you are putting away money that you don't need tomorrow. You truly are saving for retirement. But that carrot, that tax advantage, can come in two different forms. One is traditional. This is where you do not pay taxes on the money that you contribute this year. So in the example, you're making $40,000. If you put away $5,000 in a traditional account, at the end of the year, you're going to pay taxes as if you made $35,000. That money is going to be tax-free, if you will, tax-free this year. And then that money will grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And then when you take it out in retirement, you're going to pay taxes on it. You're going to note you're always going to pay taxes at some point. Government's not that nice. So no taxes now, but taxes later. Roth is exactly the opposite. When you put money in now, there's no tax advantages. You will pay taxes on it this year. It will grow and it will grow and it will grow and it will grow. And when you take it out in retirement, you do not pay any taxes on it. It's tax-free when you withdraw it in retirement. So think of this kind of like a matrix where you have to make a decision. So you might have a 401k that then offers you Roth or traditional. So you would have two options. Or then you could also put in an IRA where you might have those same options. So you wind up with a lot of choices. The things to think about are there's the 4 account types and the 2 types of ways you can possibly be taxed. Almost every employer is going to offer you that traditional account type. So if they offer a 401k or if they offer a 403b, they will probably offer it traditional. Only some employers will offer the Roth. So if that's something that's really interesting to you, you're real into tax laws, I can see all of you are, you may want to consider if that's a benefit and how important it is to you to have that option of putting away money now that doesn't get taxed later. Okay, I know that's complex and I threw a lot at you at kind of a high level very quickly. So I'm going to pause there. Questions, thoughts, concerns? Okay. That's the logistics, which isn't that interesting. But the important thing is, okay, yeah, it's a benefit, but why am I mentioning it now? Because of compound interest. Most people are familiar with this, so I'll go through it kind of quickly, but I'm a financial coach. I can't talk to you all without talking about compound interest. It's just, I'm too boring inside as a human. If you can save for retirement now, it will benefit you immensely because of how young you are and how much time you have for that money to grow. And therefore, any match that your company gives you can be very, very valuable now. So compound interest basically just means interest on interest. It means if you get some growth from your money, the next year you're going to get growth on not only the money you invested originally, but that growth you got last year. So in this really simple example you can see here, if you get simple interest, if you get 6% on $1,000, you're just going to get $60 every year. Boom, 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 boom. 160, 120, etc. Or 1,060, you get the idea. Compounded, it's going to grow more every year. So you can see the first year you get 60, but then you get 64 because you get some growth from that old 60. And then you get some number that's higher than that, but I don't want to do the math because you're going to get growth on that. So it keeps growing. And while that sounds like, okay, not a ton, we only started with $1,000, but you wind up with a full 1,000 more 20 years later. So a full, 50% more because of that compound interest. So if you don't believe me that it's important, believe this guy you may have heard of, Albert something, Einstein, I think. Compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, he who doesn't pay it. So a little note there, be aware. Your credit card also has compound interest working against you, so be careful about that. And compound interest is the greatest mathematical discovery of all time for a guy who made some of the greatest mathematical discoveries of all time. That's pretty good. So, last thing before we kind of wrap it up, to show you what that can mean for you. So the general rule of thumb is that you want to be putting 10 to 15% of your gross income into savings and investments from kind of the day you start working. This typically is enough to get people a very comfortable retirement. I know that can sound like a big number. We say it here on the bottom. It's kind of scary. You guys have a great opportunity because you're probably going to start making more than you've ever made before, and so you won't suddenly notice 10% disappearing out of your paycheck. So if you can, I would start that day one. But if you can't, consider putting whatever you can to get that company match, and we'll talk about that one more time, in, and then consider increasing the amount you put in either every time you get a raise or maybe every 6 to 9 months. You're not going to notice that 1% every so often the way you would going from 0 to 5 or 5 to 10. But you can see here, this makes a huge difference. If you save 3% of your income, and obviously the example here, these are based on $50,000 of income, save for 40 years at 6%. If you save 3% of your income, it's very possible to wind up with $250,000. Sounds like a lot of money, it's a good idea, but if you're saving 15% of your income, you're going to wind up with $1.2 million. I don't know about you guys, I'd prefer the 1.2. ASU students are better at math than me, so if I'm wrong, correct me. Where this matters is, like we mentioned, that company match, right? Let's say you're able to put away 10% and the company can offer you 5. That may not seem like a lot right now, but over that 40 years, that effectively takes you from 10 to 15. That can be worth almost $400,000. So you want to be thinking about that employer match and thinking about what that might mean for you down the line if you have 2 job offers that you're a little bit torn between and one is offering something different than the other. So you've been very quiet during this part. Questions, concerns, thoughts? Anybody want 1.2 million? No, just me? Okay, I'll take it. I'll take all yours, actually. Thank you.
Two-part question. First, I was curious about what happens if you leave a job early. What happens to your retirement fund? And secondly, if you leave earlier than certain time period, would your company still match whatever you invest?
Thank you for being here today as my plant. You've asked the question I asked you to ask, so you can leave now whenever you want. Great question. Let's talk about it. So some things to talk about when it comes to the value of your retirement plan. The details of what the company is matching, if anything, should be included in your benefits package. But what you want to look out for are what's called vesting rules or formulas. So oftentimes, jobs come with what's called vesting, which basically means if you leave the job before the vesting period, you may not get to keep all of the company match. Now, to be clear, you will always, always, always be able to take any money that you put in for retirement. You can either roll it to a new company, so you can take your old 401k and put it into your new 401k, or you can roll it into that IRA, that personal retirement account we talked about. So that money's always yours, but the match might not be. So typically, they're on a schedule. Let's say you get a 3% match in job 1 with a 3-year vesting. That typically means if you're there a year, you get to keep 1%. 2 years, 2%, 3 years, 3%. But if you leave, let's say 2 years in, they will go back into that retirement account and take back a percent that they gave you in year 1 and year 2. Does that make sense? You only get whatever you're vested in. Sometimes that's what's called a cliff. So, hey, 3 years you get everything. Before 3 years you get nothing. Sometimes it's a percentage every year. Excuse me. So you want to make sure that you understand what they're offering you and what that means, especially if down the line you are thinking about, hey, maybe it's time for a new job. Well, if you're 6 weeks away from vesting, maybe it's time for a job in 6 weeks and a day, if that makes sense, because you want to take all that with you. The other thing to think about is oftentimes they are offered based on a formula. So it may be something like this in job 2, 50% of the first 10% of your salary. That's a fancy way of saying if you put in 1%, they'll give you like a 0.5%. If you put in 2%, they'll give you 1%. So they're only going to match 50% of what you put in with a cap at 10. So if you put in 10%, they would give you an additional 5. But if you put in less than 10%, you're not going to be getting your full match. Once you go above that, no problem. So something to think about, this is a way they do it to incentivize you to save more, right? If they just gave you 5% at 100% match, you'd probably only put in 5%. Now they're incentivizing you to put in 10. Last note on this with vesting, because I should have mentioned it when I talked about it originally. This is not rolling. So once you're at the company 3 years, you are vested, and you're vested for all money past and future. It's not like if you're in year 4, your year 2 money is still vesting. Does that make sense? Once you hit 3 years, everything is vested from now until the end of time, in this example. So, pretty simple to calculate here. Figure out what you're getting matched. So 3% of salary at $40,000. If this person puts in the full 3%, or he's going to get $1,200. Job 2, 50% of the first 10%. A little bit more complex, but again, you can get the idea. $1,750. Remember, for job 1, if this person leaves before 3 years, they may not get that full amount. And then you simply add it. So you can see here in our example, yes, job 1 is still providing you slightly more in compensation. However, that gap has narrowed pretty significantly. So it may be worth thinking about, hey, am I willing to take that little bit of a difference for some of the additional benefits? Because I know, let's say I need better health insurance than the average person, or I know I want those 4 weeks of PTO, or I know I want to retire early. I don't know. Ultimately, those are decisions only you can make, but I want you to be able to compare and contrast so you know, and you can be thinking about this as you get, your 8 or 9 job offers. So that's kind of the idea. Some next steps, because I want to always leave you with some action to take. I would think about, especially as you get into this kind of season, what benefits are most important for you. So I'll put in that caveat, most people should have disability, but beyond that, do you want to retire early? Well, it's uncommon, but things like State Farm still offer pensions. So that might be something that's really important to you. Or do you want to have significant PTO? Or do you want to have the ability to work flex hours? Or what are the most important benefits to you? When you receive an offer, make sure that you're looking at that whole picture, right? If you get a job offer that's $40,000 and one that's $35,000, but this person has no match and you have to pay for your own health insurance, and this person has a pension, okay, well, that's going to be a really different compensation package. So you really want to make sure that you're asking for that. Don't be afraid to ask some questions. They may not be able to give you every detail, but at least they can tell you, we're comprehensive on this, we offer this, we don't offer that. If you've picked already, or you only have the one job offer, like I did, I'm not an ASU student, sorry, then you want to make sure that you are prioritizing what's important to you. If you have multiple health insurance options, make sure you know what's right for you. If you are starting the company retirement plan, make sure you know if they have a match and what the value of that is and that you're using it. Make sure that you're thinking about, do I want to buy supplemental disability or not? Those sort of questions. And then we are right at time, but I will stick around either up here or unless they, come with the cane, in which case in the back, and happy to answer any questions that you have. So with that, any questions that you have, again, a reminder, if you're interested in opportunities at State Farm, come talk to Rich. If you want more of this sort of education on anything, retirement, credit, budgeting, as you start getting out into the kind of the working world, make sure to take a picture of this slide, go subscribe, it's all free. The tools section on our website is also there for you, as I mentioned. Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions? Hit me.
If we are planning to retire early, do the retirement considerations change? Like if we want to retire at 40 instead of 60?
Yeah. There's a lot of pieces that go into that, but I'll tell you the most simple and obvious one. You have to save more earlier. So there are some things about how you get your retirement money out of those accounts and some other things that we could talk about, and probably not suitable for a conversation right now just because it would take several minutes. But the big thing is the more you can save, which means being frugal, being smart about where you save, and considering things like a company match or a pension or something that can get you there a little bit quicker. The good news, bad news about that is if you're good at being frugal, that helps on both sides. It helps you save more now, but then also spend less in retirement, so that can work well for you. So kind of high level, but hopefully that's a start for an answer of your question. I'm happy to talk more in the back. Any other questions? Okay, do not forget to fill out those evaluations for Jasmine. She would very much appreciate it, unless you're going to say bad things, in which case please forget to fill out those evaluations.